The vehicle wasn't on the schedule, the registration didn't exist, and the man driving it was the Queen Consort's son. No escort, no documentation, just a heavy green Jaguar estate car with a trunk sagging under its own secrets. Inside Clarence House, staff looked the other way, but the Royal Guard didn't, because when the diplomatic tag came back blank, and Camilla herself refused inspection, he didn't ask again. He slammed his rifle butt straight through the trunk lock and uncovered what had been missing from the royal collection since the day Queen Elizabeth died. The late Queen's coronation diamonds, hidden, waiting to be melted into a necklace bearing Camilla's initials. Before we show you exactly how this confrontation exploded and what happened when next, make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Because what you're about to see is one of the most shocking moments ever to unfold on Crown property. The sky over Clarence House hung low that morning, grey, flat, colourless. The kind of London grey that pressed down on everything and made the air taste like wet stone. Hedges trimmed sharp, gravel raked smooth. The Union Jack barely stirring above the gate. Sergeant Arthur Bainbridge stood at the inner perimeter like he'd been carved from the same stone as the building behind him. 15 years of service had trained his body to stand still, but his instincts? Those never stopped moving. He shifted his weight slightly, just enough to ease the stiffness in his left knee. Not age, Helmand. A reminder that ceremonial duty didn't erase what came before it. The rifle at his side was polished, perfectly aligned, more than decoration. He was more than decoration, and most people never understood that. A Bentley was scheduled, deep blue, Camilla's usual, same chauffeur. Cleared 2 days in advance through Royal Household Operations. What arrived instead was a dark green Jaguar estate, unannounced, unregistered, unwelcome. It glided into the courtyard like it owned the cobblestones, tinted windows nearly opaque, wheels so polished clean despite the gravel approach. A car that didn't look driven, it looked staged. Arthur's gaze sharpened. The rear axle sagged, not dramatically but enough. Off-balance weight distribution. Something heavy in the trunk, and the diplomatic tag on the dash. Blank. Not missing. Blank. The license plate caught his attention next. He tapped twice on his encrypted tablet, waited for the scan to process. No match found. He tried again. Broader sweep, Metropolitan Police, Civil Registry, Diplomatic Access Logs. No match found. His jaw tightened. Third attempt. MOD Transport Layer. Still blank. Not a wrong entry. Not a stolen plate. This car had been intentionally scrubbed from every official system in London. As it rolled to a smooth stop near the south entrance, Arthur took one step forward. Not enough to draw attention, just enough to see the driver's profile. A man in a tailored coat, thin-framed glasses, face angled down, no eye contact, no acknowledgement. Not the driver they'd been told to expect, and definitely not the car. Arthur didn't move from his post, but something inside him shifted. A quiet recalibration, a switch flipping from routine to alert. This wasn't a family visit. This wasn't an early guest. This was deliberate. His thumb hovered over the tablet's secondary menu. Protocol required escalation only in the presence of visible threat or procedural irregularity. This had both. Arthur Bainbridge, Coldstream Guard and son of a Falklands veteran, had never in his career ignored a warning bell when it rang this loud. He opened a silent log and typed the first line. Unscheduled vehicle. No registry match. Priority flag. Awaiting justification. Then he watched the car door open, and the courtyard got quieter. Inside the Jaguar, the air smelled faintly of leather and lilac perfume. Windows up, doors sealed. The rest of the world locked out. Camilla sat with her back perfectly straight, gloves folded over her lap. But her eyes kept flicking toward the trunk, quick, nervous glances like someone checking a stolen purse. She wore a high-collar teal coat stitched with gold thread and a sapphire brooch so large it caught the light every time she adjusted her seatbelt. Diamonds already glittered at her throat. Real ones, but not the ones. "Tell me again," she said, voice cool and clipped. "The contents were sealed exactly as I instructed." Thomas Parker Bowles gripped the wheel, knuckles pale against the black leather, secured in the lined case. Temperature regulated, foam padding. Everything looks like it came from the bloody British Museum. Camilla let out a short laugh, sharp. "It did, darling. That's the point." He didn't respond. She leaned back, staring up through the tinted glass. "It's almost poetic, isn't it? These stones have been locked away since her funeral. All that sparkle, collecting dust in Windsor. For what? Symbolism, legacy, nonsense." Thomas glanced sideways. "They belong to your mother-in-law." "She's dead," Camilla said flatly, "and I am queen consort now. These pieces were meant to shine on royalty, not sit behind glass for school children to point at." He shifted uncomfortably. "You really think no one will notice? That's not some trinket from the pantry. That's the Cullinan pairing, 3 and 4, the ones from her coronation set." Camilla turned her head slowly. "And if I'm photographed wearing a custom setting at the Vienna Gala next month, who will know where the stones came from? No one examines settings anymore. They see sparkle and applaud the budget." Thomas tapped his finger against the gear stick. "That guard out there, Bainbridge, I think. He's watching us." "He always watches," she said dismissively. "Eyes of a hawk, personality of an ironing board. But he's ceremonial. Looks good in red, salutes the right people, stands still when told." "He ran the plates," Thomas muttered. Camilla didn't flinch. "Let him. It won't pull up anything." Thomas paused, then added under his breath, "It pulled up nothing. Not even a mismatch. The car's completely blank." Camilla's eyes narrowed. "Then he knows we scrubbed it. Which means he also knows it wasn't an accident." Thomas glanced in the rearview mirror, watching Bainbridge's silhouette by the gate. "You think he'll act on it?" "He works for us," Camilla said, snapping open a compact to touch up her powder. "Not the other way around." She clicked it shut with a sharp snap. "And if he forgets that—" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then perhaps it's time someone reminded him what happens when the crown turns on its own ornaments." Sergeant Arthur Bainbridge hadn't moved from his post, but his gaze hadn't left the Jaguar either. The car idled near the south entrance, engine purring low and smooth. 20 feet away, footmen hovered under the archway, uncertain whether to approach. Even they sensed something off. Arthur pulled up the vehicle's thermal signature on his tablet, a secondary scan most guards never bothered with. The trunk read warmer than ambient temperature, climate controlled. That wasn't standard for personal vehicles. That was archival grade. He cross-referenced the Jaguar's make and model against Royal Household Fleet records, not listed. Then checked private contractor logs used for official transport. Nothing. This car had been deliberately kept off every system that mattered. Arthur's finger hovered over the escalation button. One tap, and this would go to command. But if he was wrong, if this was some bizarre but legitimate arrangement, his career would be over by lunch. He watched Thomas's hand move to the door handle, watched him glance at the rear-view mirror, watched him hesitate just long enough to confirm what Arthur already knew. Guilty people always hesitated. Arthur waited until the driver's door opened. Thomas Parker Bowles stepped out, adjusting his sleeves with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never been late without an excuse. He offered no greeting, no nod, just the shallow acknowledgement of a man who thought proximity was permission. Arthur gave it 3 more seconds, then approached. "Excuse me, sir," he said clearly, voice crisp but courteous. "Before the vehicle proceeds, I'll need to confirm entry details." Thomas turned, amused. "Entry details? Registration, cargo manifest, point of departure. The car's not logged in the clearance docket." Thomas smiled like someone indulging a child. "You do know who's in the back seat?" Arthur didn't blink. "Yes, sir. That's why I'm asking." From the rear window, the glass lowered halfway. Camilla leaned forward, one gloved hand resting on the sill. Her expression wasn't annoyance. It was disappointment, the kind people reserve for underlings who've stepped out of line. "Sergeant Bainbridge," she said, enunciating every syllable. "Are you quite certain you want to stop a vehicle containing the Queen Consort on her own grounds?" Arthur maintained his posture. "Ma'am, with respect, your usual vehicle is a Bentley. This is a Jaguar estate. Its registration is absent from our logs, and its diplomatic credentials are blank." Thomas smirked, eyes sweeping the courtyard. "Do you stop Amazon vans this thoroughly?" Arthur turned slightly, lowering his voice just enough. "The rear axles sagging, sir. Trunks heavier than standard tolerance. Aftermarket hinges. Reinforced. Unusual for personal transport." Camilla's eyes sharpened. "And?" she asked. "Per Section 4 of Residence Security Protocol," Arthur said calmly, "I'm required to visually verify contents if irregular weight distribution and undocumented modifications are detected on unregistered vehicles." There it was, the line they didn't expect him to cross. Camilla's voice iced over. "We have a private meeting with the Archbishop. You'd detain us over suspension springs?" Arthur held her gaze. "I'm not detaining, ma'am. I'm requesting voluntary compliance before I log escalation." Thomas laughed outright. "My God, he's quoting policy at us." Camilla tilted her head. "We are the policy." Arthur said nothing. Instead, he stepped back, keyed something into his encrypted tablet, and logged it silently. Section 4 initiated. Potential Class A asset diversion. Awaiting override or clearance. The message disappeared from his screen a second later, but not before it pinged the desk at Wellington Barracks. And not before Camilla saw the change in his posture, the shift from request to requirement. Her smile tightened. "Well," she said softly, "you've just made this very, very memorable." Arthur didn't flinch. He was counting on it. The Jaguar's engine cut with a quiet shudder. For a moment, the courtyard seemed to hold its breath. Then the rear door swung open, and Camilla stepped out. Her heels clicked sharply against the stone. Teal coat shimmering beneath the muted sky. Diamond brooch glittering at her collarbone like a dare. She adjusted one glove and turned to face Arthur with a look not of concern, but command. Thomas followed, pulling on dark leather gloves like an actor preparing for a final scene he'd already decided would end in applause. "Let's not embarrass ourselves further, Sergeant," Camilla said, projecting just enough for nearby staff to hear. "This is a royal residence, not a checkpoint in Kabul." Arthur didn't move. "Ma'am, the trunk remains sealed, and no clearance has been granted for its contents. Until that changes, I cannot allow movement beyond the courtyard." Thomas gave a loud, performative sigh. "I knew this was him. The one with the stare. Honestly, does he sleep standing up?" Across the stone yard, a valet slowed his steps. Two aides lingered outside the archway. Even a florist, delivering arrangements for the afternoon, paused beyond the gates. Everyone sensed it now. This wasn't protocol. This was power colliding with something that refused to bend. "You're not MI5, Thomas said, taking a step closer. "You're a guard with a pretty hat and a polished rifle. That's all." Arthur didn't look at him. "Sir, please return to the vehicle." Camilla stepped forward. "You seem confused, Sergeant. You serve the Crown. The Crown is represented at this moment by me." Arthur turned his head slightly toward her. "I serve the Sovereign, not individual preference. And protocol, ma'am, is not elective." Camilla's lips parted in shock, like someone had slapped her without making contact. "You insolent—" But before the word finished forming, Arthur gave a subtle hand signal, palm down. Two fingers flicked once. Across the yard, Corporal Jennings emerged from the side colonnade and began walking toward them, casual, steady, no rush, but purposeful. Camilla noticed. Her eyes snapped to Arthur's hand, then back to his face. "You're escalating?" Arthur said nothing. Thomas chuckled nervously. "You think you're a soldier in a coup." The wind picked up, swirling the hem of Camilla's coat, scattering a few rose petals from the florist's open crate. The scent of flowers mingled with tension. "You so much as touch that car," Camilla said, voice low and venomous, "and you're finished. No pension, no ceremony. You'll be folded into silence so quickly you'll forget you ever stood here." Arthur's hand dropped to his side. He didn't reach for his rifle. He didn't need to, because in that moment, just behind Camilla, a soft metallic chirp came from the Jaguar's boot. The automatic lock had just rearmed itself. Arthur's eyes tracked the sound, then moved to Thomas's hand, still half buried in his coat pocket. The subtle press of a thumb against a button. The shift in his posture when he realized he'd been seen. "Remote locking system," Arthur said, voice flat. "Aftermarket installation. Not factory standard." Camilla opened her mouth to respond, but Arthur cut her off. "That means you anticipated resistance. Planned for it. Built countermeasures into a vehicle you claimed was just family transport." Thomas pulled his hand out slowly. "You're reaching." "Am I?" Arthur stepped closer. "Because standard Jaguar estates don't have biometric trunk releases, or climate-controlled cargo bays, or remote override systems tied to personal devices." He looked directly at Thomas now. "You built this car to move something valuable, something you couldn't risk being discovered. And you just locked it again, right in front of me, because you're terrified of what's inside." The courtyard had gone completely still, and Arthur saw everything he needed. The chirp from the trunk echoed across the stone, like a whisper that had waited too long to be heard. Arthur's eyes flicked toward the rear of the vehicle. The boot had just locked itself again, electronically, remotely. He caught the motion. Thomas, standing behind Camilla, had slipped one hand into his coat pocket. A clicker. Hidden, but not fast enough. Arthur didn't speak. He moved. One step. Two. Smooth. Deliberate. Faster than protocol, but slower than panic. And before anyone could object, he unslung his ceremonial rifle from his shoulder, adjusted the angle like he'd done 1,000 times on parade grounds, and with one sudden, jarring motion, slammed the steel buttplate directly against the lock. The sound was surgical, a clean, ringing crack that cut through the courtyard like thunder. The aftermarket plate shattered on contact, paint chipped, metal dented inward. Gasps rang out from the valets. Aides froze in place. Someone near the archway whispered, "What did he just do?" The boot jolted. The internal latch, no longer aligned, gave way with a reluctant metallic groan. The trunk opened, an inch, then another, then fully. Inside, velvet-lined black. But Arthur didn't look down, because the explosion came from behind him. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" Camilla's voice split the air like glass, shattering inside a cathedral. She stormed forward, eyes wide, mouth twisting into something primal, not performative anymore, not entitled, furious. "You've gone mad," she hissed. "Do you know what that car represents? That this is my vehicle, that you just destroyed private royal property?" Arthur didn't flinch. Section 4 authorizes forced access under unresponsive sealed storage during clearance denial. Thomas charged forward. "You're quoting emergency statutes for a family car?" "You tampered with a diplomatic override tag," Arthur said, turning fully to face them now. "That's not family business. That's breach of security." Camilla reached out suddenly, grabbing the front of Arthur's red tunic. "You ceremonial mannequin," she spat. "You overpaid statue. You think this gets you a medal? You've humiliated the Queen Consort in her own courtyard." Arthur didn't move, didn't even glance at her gloved hand gripping his uniform. He simply said, "Release me, ma'am." Her hand stayed fixed, but Jennings was already there. "Ma'am," he said gently but firmly, "I need you to step back." 2 more guards arrived, quiet and composed, forming a subtle perimeter. None of them raised their voice. They didn't need to, because the trunk was wide open now, and silence had returned to the courtyard, thick and watchful. Camilla stood frozen, trembling, still gripping Arthur's lapel until Jennings eased her back by the forearm. Thomas stared at the exposed contents, colour draining from his face. Arthur finally turned and looked inside, then exhaled and said quietly, "Secure the area. Nobody approaches this vehicle." Because nestled inside, gleaming softly in the velvet black, were the missing diamonds of the late Queen Elizabeth II. The interior of the Jaguar's trunk was nothing like civilian storage. It was lined with matte black steel, fitted with reinforced brackets and internal latches. In the centre sat a sealed diplomatic case, squat, rectangular, unmistakably military grade, not cargo, not luggage. Something meant to hold what could not be replaced. Arthur stepped closer and unlatched the front flap. The velvet lining inside gleamed with a dim, almost reverent lustre. Soft lighting from the case's internal panel cast a golden hue across the contents, rows of padded slots, each custom carved, each cradling brilliance, loose diamonds, some as large as acorns, others arranged in delicate groupings like a crown's shattered remains. At the centre, two oval-cut stones, identical in clarity and fire. Arthur stared. He didn't need a jeweller. Every man in that courtyard knew what they were looking at. The Cullinan, Jennings breathed behind him. 3 and 4. Arthur nodded once. Coronation pairing. Documented. Historical. Priceless. Missing from the royal collection since Queen Elizabeth II's passing. Rumours had circled quietly. Internal audits postponed. Inventories delayed. Pieces under review for maintenance. But no one had spoken the truth. Until now. He reached down and lifted a slim portfolio tucked between the velvet compartments. Inside, design sketches, detailed renderings of a necklace, 12 diamonds, gold chainwork, a central pendant featuring the Cullinan pairing, handwritten notes along the border, Vienna Gala, final fitting by Thursday. Jennings stepped forward, reading over his shoulder. This wasn't preservation. This was conversion. Arthur nodded. From behind them, Camilla found her voice again, but it cracked this time. You have no idea what you're looking at. These are heirlooms. I'm simply consolidating legacy. Arthur turned. By melting the Queen's coronation diamonds into a vanity necklace? They're not yours to protect, she snapped. They were part of her private effects. Charles and I agreed. Charles isn't here, Arthur said calmly. And neither is the Queen, she spat, and she left no binding instructions. Thomas stepped forward now, voice low, trying to spin the narrative. This was a transfer. We had intentions to restore and display the set at Sandringham after the gala. You're misinterpreting protocol. Arthur held up the design sketches. Sketches for a necklace bearing your mother's royal cipher and Camilla's initials. Melted stones. This isn't restoration. He turned back to the trunk and gently lifted a small pouch. Inside were 5 loose stones, still labelled with archival tags, Queen Mary's lesser-known heirlooms. Every label read, Royal Collection, Restricted Transfer. Vault 3A, Balmoral. Jennings exhaled. That's a Class A theft. No, Arthur said quietly, that's a desecration. Camilla reached for the case again, but this time Arthur stepped in her path. Jennings moved faster, radioing quietly for perimeter lockdown and transit prep. And in the silence that followed, Arthur's voice was the only one that held. This doesn't belong to you, ma'am. The courtyard had gone quiet again. Not out of peace, but containment. Like something dangerous had finally stopped moving. Then, from the north gate, came the low hum of an approaching vehicle. No sirens. No escort, just a single Navy Land Rover Defender rolling across the gravel with the weight of someone who didn't need spectacle to be noticed. The gates didn't open for her. They had already been opened. Princess Anne stepped out before the vehicle fully stopped. She wore no crown, no sash, no ceremonial nonsense. Just a dark olive riding jacket, high boots dusted from the countryside, and a face like carved granite. She moved across the courtyard with the unhurried precision of a woman who'd spent her life walking into storms and never bringing an umbrella. Arthur straightened. Camilla turned, mouth already open. What are you doing here? Anne didn't break stride. I was summoned. Camilla's eyes narrowed. By whom? Wellington Barracks, Anne replied evenly. And before you accuse them of overreach, I suggest you stop speaking until you've seen what I've seen. She walked directly to Arthur, didn't ask permission, didn't wait. Show me. Arthur stepped aside and opened the case. Anne peered in, just once, just long enough. She didn't gasp, didn't flinch, didn't blink, but her silence hardened. "These stones," she said flatly, "are catalogued under the Royal Collection Archive. They were last seen in Balmoral. Vault 3A. Camilla scoffed. "Don't pretend you've never moved heirlooms before. They're for presentation. Their origin is ceremonial." Anne looked up slowly. "So are you." Thomas shifted his weight uneasily, trying to interject. "It's not what it looks like. This wasn't a theft. It was a family allocation." Anne closed the case, snapped the latch. "Thomas," she said, turning toward him, with all the warmth of an open grave, "you are not a trustee of the Royal Collection. You are not a monarch. And you certainly don't decide when we melt down the crown." Camilla's voice was low now, dangerous. "They were in my care." Charles approved. Anne raised a hand. Silence. She turned back to Arthur. "Has the asset been inventoried?" "Not yet, ma'am. Identification confirmed. Sketches secured. Case remains sealed." Anne nodded. "Then you are to prepare immediate transit to the Tower for classified impoundment. Chain of custody passes through me." Camilla stepped forward fast. "You do not have the authority to seize private property." Anne raised an eyebrow. "Private property?" "You removed Class A royal artefacts from a heritage vault, transported them in an unregistered vehicle, bypassed protocol, and redesigned them with your initials." She paused. "Do you think this is a jewellery box, Camilla? Or a crown?" Camilla's lips parted, but no words came, because whatever she'd intended, it had just slipped out of her control. Camilla's eyes darted to the guards flanking the courtyard. Jennings stood by the diplomatic case now, unflinching. 2 more Coldstream guards had quietly sealed the southern gate. The Queen Consort was surrounded by silent steel, and the one thing she'd never prepared for, opposition. Her voice came out high and sharp. "You've all lost your minds. This is a ceremonial misunderstanding, not a criminal act." Arthur said nothing. He didn't need to. Thomas stepped forward instead, face flushed. "You're making a spectacle of this. You think uniforms make you prosecutors?" Arthur finally looked at him. "No, sir. Protocol does." "You'll be court-martialed before dinner," Thomas snapped. Arthur's expression didn't shift. "You're not in the chain of command, sir. You're barely in the clearance log." Princess Anne took one slow step toward Camilla, eyes locked. "Let me make something clear," she said, voice low but ringing with authority. "This isn't about fashion or favoritism. It's about theft and disgrace." Camilla straightened. "Disgrace," she hissed. "Everything I've done, every sacrifice, every smile through gritted teeth, every handshake with people I loathe has been for this family." Anne's eyes narrowed. "And yet here you are, carving it up for jewellery." Camilla's fury boiled over. "You think this throne was ever kind to me? You think I married into fairy tales and affection? I did what I had to do, because she wouldn't leave." "She died," Arthur said quietly. "That's how she left." The words stopped the air. Camilla's head snapped toward him. "You will not speak to me like that." Arthur's voice remained calm. "And you will not rewrite the legacy of a woman whose shadow you've never outrun." Camilla looked like she might strike him. Instead, she turned on Anne. "Don't pretend you're better than me. You've hidden worse." Anne didn't blink. "Yes, but I've never been caught stuffing the crown into a car boot," Thomas snapped. "You're all obsessed with ceremony and shadows. None of this matters. The people want sparkle, not history." Arthur took one step forward. "Then perhaps you should have joined the circus." "Enough!" Camilla shouted. "This is not your monarchy." Anne turned to Jennings. "Get the case to the defender and call ahead to the Tower. This leaves under royal custody." Jennings nodded. "Already en route, ma'am." Camilla was shaking now. "You'll regret this." "You think Charles will sit idly by?" Anne's tone dropped to lethal calm. "If he has any sense left, he'll thank me for stopping this embarrassment before it reached the press." Thomas tried one last jab. "You're siding with a foot soldier?" Anne looked at Arthur. "No, I'm siding with the only person here who still knows what loyalty means. The case was lifted. Guards stepped back. Camilla watched it go, like something had been torn from her spine. She lunged. Wait! But it was already locked inside, and she had nothing left to hold. The defenders' rear doors slammed shut with two dull, final thuds. Inside, the sealed diplomatic case no longer glittered under velvet, but pulsed with something heavier. Judgment. Arthur Bainbridge watched as two guards flanked the vehicle. Jennings moved to the front passenger side, clipboard in hand, logging the chain of custody in precise handwriting. Across the courtyard, staff were quietly dispersing. No orders had been given, but none were needed. This was no longer a scene, it was a message. Camilla stood near the edge of the stone steps, one hand gripping the iron railing, chest rising and falling like a woman who'd been struck but refused to fall. Thomas was a shade of himself, hands in pockets, lips twitching, teeth grinding behind a pale smile that convinced no one. Anne walked back toward Arthur, stride unbroken. "You've done your duty," she said quietly, "not for the crowd, but for him. Now finish it cleanly." Arthur nodded. He turned to the nearest aide and issued 3 simple commands. Lock down the car, impound the vehicle, notify Royal Collections for a full audit under Anne's name. No press releases. Camilla found her voice again. "You've humiliated this family in public." Arthur turned. "No, Mum." "You did." She stepped forward. "You think you've made yourself a hero?" "No," Arthur replied, adjusting his rifle strap. "Just a servant who remembers what he's serving." Thomas scoffed. "All this for a few polished rocks." Arthur met his gaze. "They were never just stones. They were history. And you tried to turn them into jewellery." Camilla spat the next words. "The monarchy doesn't need guards who think they're priests." Arthur held her eyes. "Then perhaps it shouldn't crown thieves as queens." Gasps rippled behind them. Even Anne blinked, once. Camilla looked ready to lunge again, but Anne stepped between them. "That's enough," Camilla wheeled on her. "You're defending this mannequin in boots over your own family?" Anne's voice came cold and clean. "He just defended something far more important than family." "And what's that?" Anne didn't hesitate. "The crown." The courtyard fell silent. The defender pulled forward slowly, tires crunching gravel. The case was gone now, beyond their reach, and with it, so was the illusion of control Camilla had gripped for years. As it rolled past them, Camilla muttered, "Those diamonds were mine." Arthur didn't look at her. He simply said, "They were hers." Camilla's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Thomas looked away, jaw tight. Anne turned to Arthur one last time. "Return to your post, Sergeant." Arthur saluted. "Yes, ma'am." Anne faced Camilla. Her tone was final, measured, delivered not as opinion, but decree. "The Queen's diamonds are not your costume jewellery." And then she turned her back, leaving Camilla alone, not stripped of her title, but something far worse, stripped of her place. Should a royal guard have the right to forcibly open a royal's vehicle if he suspects theft? Did Princess Anne handle this the right way, or did she go too far? No. And what should happen to Camilla and Thomas now that they've been caught? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on so you never miss what really happens behind the Crown's most guarded walls. And if you know someone who still remembers the late Queen's diamonds, share this video with them. We upload every single day, so click the next story on your screen and we'll see you tomorrow.